What's up, everybody? We are here to talk about Scales of Fate. I am Zach Dixon. I am joined by Max Anderson and Austin Harrison. We are the game designers of Scales of Fate, and we're just going to kind of walk you through what happened. How did we get here?
They always start bad. Is
always-
what you should expect.
Do either of you remember who? So usually one of us starts.
Yeah.
One of us has the inkling. It wasn't me.
It was Max, and then I claimed it a month later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Max had the
Which
idea.
happens a lot, honestly.
You had the idea at a con, right, Max?
Yeah, on the way to the airport after the con.
Oh, nice.
And it was not a real idea. It was the semblance of an idea of, like, what if Veiled Fate was a lane battler? It didn't get much beyond that point.
Right. And then I, because I like rondels, was like, let's make a lane battler in a circle. And then by the time I finished describing it, it basically was the exact thing you had pitched Zach on a month before.
Except with the rondel, which is also
Except-
pretty common.
Except with the rondel.
If Austin's games always start with a rondel. You'll notice
They're one of
that
our
we've-
ideas with the rondel. Just like I blew it wide open.
And you'll notice that none of our games have a rondel in them. And they never will.
Okay, Fractured Sky doesn't have a rondel in it, but I did try to make an expansion that had a rondel in it.
So so it was a lane battler, and I feel like we like lane battlers. We're also just like another lane battler.
Yeah.
Did we have the core of like what should make this different?
Yeah, which I think is
Yes.
the Veiled Fate part of it. Like the two opposing forces in a the Scorpion's feathers combined with your average lane battler power battle.
Right.
And also, you may be thinking, wait a second, Scales of Fate is not a lane battler. This is very common.
You'd be correct.
We start as one thing, and then it ends up as another thing. So we'll get there. You're ahead of us, and I like where your head's at. But so yes, we were traveling down this lane battler road. We had I think a bunch of gods or demigods
Yes, there
with
was-
a bunch of unique powers.
Yep, that was all there.
Um,
At one point, it turned from a two-player game that was pretty simple to a four-player game where you were
Yep.
playing multiple lanes against multiple opponents, including one across the middle. And after that playtest,
I think it's important. Well, I think it's important to like contextualize why it got to that point, because like it was not a good direction, but I think at some point we wanted to grow the game.
Yeah,
And-
because up until this point, we've kind of aimed for like very middleweight, like tent pole releases. This needs to
Yep.
be, if we're going to work on this game, if we're going to make this game, it needs to be like a big Kickstarter release in one of our, launch windows, and that needs to meet a certain threshold of like of bigness.
And usually player count needs to be 4 more,
Exactly, yeah.
And so we started to realize, like, wait a second. So this is kind of cool, like as a lane battler, but it needs more. Like this is just kind of like a small thing, which it might be fine, but it's not enough to do like a whole release cycle on. So we're just like, all right, let's throw some more stuff on it, which was let's maybe add some more players.
Yeah.
Let's add the rondel, immediately lose the rondel.
You guys, that is not what happened. It was a totally different idea. I'm going to make that idea.
Well, no, and I remember because like it was also like extremely heady and complex.
so
I'm
heady.
trying to remember, Max, what was so heady about it?
We had 5 lanes.
6 lanes.
6
I think
lanes.
we kept going
lanes.
down. Yeah.
It's too many lanes.
They all had a special ability,
Right.
so
Play
you
more
had
cards. Try to win this lane. Try to lose
Yeah.
this lane. Yeah, like it was a lot.
too much. Yes, it was just way too much. It was too heady, and then at some point, I feel like this happens. We're just like, this isn't really. It's kind of fizzling out. It's not really going anywhere. And then at some point, we had a revelation of like, what if it wasn't necessarily a lane battler?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember that transition.
It was Max.
Yeah.
Max came to us with
Yeah.
tiles, right, Max?
yeah. I was trying to get back in the whole secret demigod that you get in Veiled Fate, and we ended up with a kind of like a pared down Veiled Fate experience for 2. and then we ended up getting into this like bringing back lanes and getting into what if you like voted on the outcome of a lane,
Right.
and
So you were
that's what we're seeing
placing
here.
you were placing demigods and then voting feathers or scorpions for that entire lane.
Yes.
Yeah,
and so like
yeah.
it'll trigger certain quest tiles.
Yeah, and one of the things that we realized is you do need kind of duplicate. You need to be able to mask your intentions. So I think we liked it at this point, right? It's like, okay, this is starting to come back to a good place that's like, might have a better table presence, might feel like a bigger game. But also we were just like, wait a second, are we just designing Veiled Fate again?
Yeah. Yep.
And so you have like this hidden demigod, and at some point we cracked this idea of like, okay, maybe not. What if you didn't just have one demigod? Because like, it also was starting to really feel like a two-player game at this point.
Yep.
And we're like, okay, this is interesting, right? This could be a nice separator from Veiled Fate. It's like, it's really starting to be interesting at 2 players, but there's not enough to deduce.
Right.
So let's blow it up. You get 2 demigods. And I really did not like that at first. I was like, this feels very strange.
Additionally, you had the action tokens, which are a little bit to the right on your screen there, where it was just like all these different things that could affect the lanes. And so it's like, well, I didn't actually want to put this character here. I just wanted to use that ability,
Exactly.
which gave you
We
some
thought
deniability.
The best thing about it being misdirection, and we leaned as far as we possibly could into misdirection, way too far, like
Yep.
excessively
information.
far. Where like I didn't even know why I was doing the move I was doing, and so you could hide behind so many layers and then vote on these things. And so when it comes out to like what the vote was, you don't even remember why you wanted it in the first place.
Yes. So we had to like, what we realized was this key part of it was I think we started to realize like, okay, 2 demigods could be interesting, but there's too much going on. When you're doing deduction, you kind of have to have this perfect blend of like, everything you do could be interpreted in maybe 2 ways, not 5 ways or 6 ways, because then your brain just starts to give up on like deduction
100%.
altogether, and you're just like, okay. So, and I think that's, forgive me if I'm claiming someone else's idea, but that's what I'm like, I wonder if instead of lanes, like what if we could come at this from any angle? Because one of the things that's nice about this grid setup is targeting, right? Like I need to be able to target my demigod while also targeting another demigod at the same time to give you kind of like okay, maybe he's pink or maybe he's purple. And so like if we can come at it from different sides, you can kind of snipe your demigod while also targeting another demigod. And that's the point where we're just like, this is not a lane battler anymore.
Yeah, definitely not. I think the rest of the deniability part comes from when we did switch to 2 demigods, which you were talking about, Zach, the revelation to split them to score points. It's like, I now have a reason to not just want to hurt you, but also want to hurt my own demis in order to score points. And so it's not just all about, I'm trying to get as many points as possible. It's, I'm trying to split them.
Yep.
And I really liked that next playtest when we decided on that.
Yeah, and what that did that I think also really kind of gave it its own identity separate from Veiled Fate was this really nice, like, it's not push your luck, but it's like this tense thing of like, you can go big in this game, or you can kind of play the safer route of like spreading your demigods out, scoring the difference between them, or like you can push both of them up, and which happens to me almost every time I play Scales of Fate, someone ruins that plan at the very last second because I tried to go too big, put them all both on the 12 and score 12 points.
Yep.
And so you have this really nice, like, kind of, you can push it and go big. And I love that in games. And that really sets it apart, I think, from Veiled Fate.
You'd probably start winning if you just kept pretending you were doing that.
That's
and
true.
sent one down.
I've laid down some track.
Yeah, this has all been a long play for the bluff.
Yeah, eventually I'm going to win all the time. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I think the second scoring mechanism, like, also just super helped in this, like, before we added the, like, you can land on the same spot and score that many points. What you just see is, like, just look at the demis on the outside.
Yeah,
Those
that's
are
right.
your
That's
opponent.
right. Yep.
And it's like, there's no reason to keep them anywhere else than just as far apart as possible. And so it became pretty easy to like, because I think that was a big arc of this game is like, what does deduction look like in it? And like, how did the like end of age questions like evolve over time? But I was just like dialing that all the way back, which like all of our games like throw stuff at it, dial it way back.
Right. Yep.
This definitely
I remember when you had to tell the number of demis for the questions, either 0, 1, or 2, and just like totally forgetting about the end of age question, and it was like, how many demis do you have off the board? And I had to answer 2, and there were 3 demis off the board, and my opponent looked at me like, you are so stupid. Like, why would you make this happen? Like, you could have put them on the board on any of your turns.
One of the things that I think was interesting, looking back on the design process, like, once we realized this is going to be a 2-player game, we could really start dialing in the perfect end result of deduction, right? And one of the things that's really fun about games that have deduction are these like big end game reveals. And so it's like, how can we make that end game reveal as interesting as possible? How can we add stakes to that? So one of the things we did was like, okay, this is such a fun moment at the end of the game where you find out who your opponent is. Let's actually assign some like point values to this. And I think that's another thing that really stepped it up of just like, okay, you're playing this game, but then you're also playing this game of like, I got to figure you out, and there's some actual stakes to it. And as soon as we did that, then it's like, okay, great. Figuring out your opponent really matters in this game.
Yeah.
How can we double down on that? And I think that's what brought us to these really cool like end of age. I'm trying to think, what do we even call them? Like these end of age like qualifier questions or whatever. And at first, like everything else, we tried that, and it was like, I remember the first time we tried it, it was, you just guessed mine. Like you just figured it out by process of elimination exactly what who I was.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, is this any good?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was just deduction. It wasn't any like, I wasn't doing any social parts. It was just.
You could just figure it out.
It's just like, cool, these 3 questions give me these 3 answers, therefore I know he is these 2 demis.
Yep. And it really just ended up being a minor tweak. You go, Max.
Well, just like that, it was pretty late in the game that we added the second deck. Like, that was like a big moment for like, what if you could be the same? Right.
I was super late in the game.
And
I was against it.
Because like,
I'll go on record and say I was against it, and I was wrong.
Well,
yeah, it's way better.
Yeah, we got to a place where you were pretty much always getting, like, you start with 2 of the demigods already figured out. Like they're
already crossed out. Yep.
And the
so
funny part is, if you
age
cross them
2
off on your page, your opponent could just look at that and be like, "Those are the 2 they are."
Yeah. But like at the end of age 2, a lot of times we're just like, "Oh, I already know for sure who you are," and so we're like, "How do we get back just like a tiny bit more of like that?" We're like, "Well, I guess if you couldn't cross the 2 off at the beginning, that'd be interesting." And I know you did the math at one point for the chances of having 1 or 2 of the same.
It's like 11 and 8% or something like that. I can't remember.
No, it's like 3% you have the identical ones, and it's a lot higher than you think. It's like a 20% chance that you'll share one.
Because you have 2 opportunities.
There's 2 opportunities to overlap. And it even if it's super rare, obviously 3% of games where you have the same one, but it's happened sometimes, and it's actually insanely fun.
And they're not ties. Yeah. Because someone doesn't guess right, or someone takes an extra god power, and it's so funny. We were worried about that, and then I remember it happening in one of the play tests, and they both scored it a 10 out of 10, and we were like, okay, well, they had the same demigod, and they had a blast. One thing, go ahead, Max.
Yeah, because you have like such a unique gaming experience when that happens. Like, you're both on like such different pages until the end, because like I don't think either of them guessed correctly, and so they like neither of them knew, and then it's like, wow, like all the mind games like led us to a crazy place.
That's why I want to do a Veiled Fate game where all the players are red. Like, that would just be so funny.
You just ship it.
Yeah, it works so much better with Hadria too. Anyway, that's not what we're doing. One thing that we lost that I almost wish we could get back is we played a prototype where you guessed every age who the other person's demis was. And you got more points by guessing them earlier because you'd score it every time you got it right.
Why did we lose that?
We lost that.
Because it's so luck-based.
It's super lucky-based. That's why we got it wrong. In fact, it was so luck-based that one time I got at least one of them right in the first age, and in the next 2 ages I got them wrong. I got more information and did worse as it went. And yeah, it was funny. I don't know. It was fun, but I think it made the game much more luck dependent, and that's why we got rid of it. But it was fun. So very different than a lane battler at the end.
Very different than a lane battler. But then we were like, what if we made a lane battler in the Veiled Fate universe? And then we're like, we already have one.
Yeah.
We already made one. So what happened was we decided, like, Gen Con this year, we're going to make 3 small box games. And so we were trying to, like, look back at some of our older ideas. Like, if we're going to make some small games, is there anything, is there some low-hanging fruit? And you're like, you know what? We actually kind of made a completely done lane battler. And maybe we should just bring that back without the pressure of it needing to be like this big game and just see what that can be. And then we're like, we've got, this can work.
Yeah, it was really funny picking it up after not playing it for, I don't know, 6 to 8 months. I don't know when that even was. And then being like, why did we stop working on this? This was so good. It just needed to be rebalanced. And then I remembered it's because we forced it into a 4-player version and no one liked it.
Well, and a much more like heady, complex,
way more complex,
like way more deep, maybe more depth than I think this like deduction, like lane battler like wanted to be.
Cut it down to 3 lanes. Cut out all the special like cards and just had 1 special card per round.
Yeah,
and the headspace came right down.
All the bones were there. It was just an exercise in cutting all of the excess,
which is usually my least favorite part. It wasn't on this one. This one felt Max loves it. That's
big fan of cutting. Like
too much.
It's so good.
Well, no, I think it was just like, all right, there were 6 lanes, cut it down to 3. Every card has an ability. Only 3 of your cards have an ability.
Yeah.
Like every quest has a special effect on it. One quest has a special effect on it. And then honestly, it was pretty much done.
It was
it was all there. We were just trying to force it into being a game it didn't want to be.
Me and Max played it a few times and we're like, this is great. We just need to rebalance the quests, like the positives and the negatives of winning or losing. And then we sent it to public playtesting, and then the responses were like all 8s and above that first week, and it was like, oh shoot, this is really close.
I love Zach framing months of work on
yes,
polishing and cutting as like, if you only had these exact 3 ideas to make the game perfect, that's all you need. It takes an afternoon at best.
It took 3 months, but it really was simple.
Like when you look back on it, it's based like, what were we thinking?
That's the problem. It is simple
so
when you look back on it.
Yeah. One meeting, we busted it out. We're that good.
You know what we didn't talk about?
No.
We had the hardest time figuring out how your deck would work because it started off as just 8 cards, and you'd play all 8 cards. Then we felt like that was you tied on a lot of lanes, or like 9 cards, and it didn't like work super well because it's like everyone wants to lose this lane, everyone wants to win this lane, and it was just like, okay, that's not super fun. Let's go to a centralized deck where like you just draw new cards. Then me and Max had one play test where I drew all scorpions and he drew all feathers, and I was like, I can't actually control the quests how I want because I want this to go feathers and I can't make it happen. And I saw Max having the same problem on his side of the board, and at the end we were like, a shared deck kind of opens up outlier games of just like it not working.
So this is your first time hearing of Pillars of Fate. So it's a lane battler, and you're trying to win lanes. There's a quest, but each quest has 2 outcomes. There's a scorpion and a feather outcome. So you can intentionally lose the lane, but make it go towards a negative direction. So you're getting your opponent to win it, but they're actually getting negative points. So it has this really nice push-pull. The other thing that's weird about it is one of the cards gets played face down. So it's a lot of like mind games and that sort of thing, which feels very, very Veiled Fatey. But one of the things about going to a centralized deck that was a really nice step was we realized like, oh, we can actually make all cards kind of be equal. Like there's no bad cards to draw in your hand. And that really helped us, find this new direction, which eventually led to the final iteration.
Right. Yeah, and I think
because perfect information on your deck, like each round, is like what your mind goes to is like what you want. Like I want to know my cards and play them in like the most strategic way. But like you lose so much of the fun of like responding to what you're given is like such a huge part in games, to be like, how do I make this work? And then when you win, it feels much like richer. But then also there's just something so fun about like hoping for the card you want in your deck, and like just like keep drawing after every turn and be like, it's gonna be the one I need. It's the exact one I'm going for.
And then when you get it,
when that hits, it's so good.
It's so good.
I also bluff, you know? I'm just like, yeah, I got the card I didn't want. And I'm just like, yes, you're done now.
The other thing that we learned is if it was too, like, I think we tried some iterations where you played all your cards. And I think we noticed in playtesting that, like, we had some card counters who were just like, and they were spending a lot of time thinking about, like, okay, my one is going to come up in this last age. And you almost feel dumb because you're like, oh, yeah, I should have known that I wasn't going to get that. I should have known that I was going to do that. And so we realized that it was pretty crucial to, like, free the player from the burden of, like, needing to count cards, needing to remember every single card you've played. That's not fun. Like, and so, like, yes, there is that little bit of luck element, but what we learned from the centralized deck is all these cards are good, right? The middling cards are harder to win lose lanes in, but they have the most suits. And so, like, we were able to balance the cards where it's like, yes, you might not draw all your nines, but that's fine. Like, and you don't need to think about it. And then also when I lose, I can blame that, you know, my 9 totally didn't show up, and then I look through my cards and I'm like, oh no, I did play 2 9s.
No.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But we are very stoked with how these 2 games came out. We hope that you check them out. It's on Kickstarter right now, going through April 2nd.
April 2nd.
believe.
Wow, you've been on top of dates this time.
You know,
Zach.
dates. I remember them all the time. This is not abnormal. But yeah, we're gonna go design some more games now. And thanks for watching this little dev diaries where we take you soup to nuts on one of our prototypes to the end game.